and a British Queen's Counsel. The law on passing off all intellectual property laws are very well developed in the United States, are very well developed in the European Union, in the United Kingdom. You can be rest assured we will be enriched by a lot of that law. Having said that, I think we should also have the opportunity to be going out and arguing, because today I believe a lot of good law is coming out of this country. We should have an equal opportunity of going and doing the same. I think that's the only way forward. I could go on this, but I'll wait for further questions.
I think we might have a bit of a band-aid solution for Norman to get onto this conversation. Norman, any thoughts that you might have on international firms or foreign firms? How do they look at a new geography, which would include India? What is the thought process that happens with different kinds of firms?
Yes, so good afternoon, everybody. I think one of the most important principles is that we cannot rely on the internet yet to deliver sophisticated legal services, as our experience this afternoon suggests. I look at the issue of the liberalization of a legal market from two perspectives. From the perspective, first of all, of advising the national and local firms about their strategic response, and secondly, from the external perspective of understanding the thinking of foreign firms when they consider entry into a market. Now, with respect to India, India is a very large and complex legal market that is already populated with sophisticated and well-established law firms. And so for any foreign law firm to enter that market requires a degree of confidence that the market is going to continue to grow to make space for new competitors, especially ones that may be carrying the disadvantages of being outsiders. So a big question for any foreign firm, whether they are considering India or any other large jurisdiction, should always be, what will be our space? What will be our space? Where will we fit into this market, and how much will it cost us to occupy a place in that market? So the approach generally is a cautious approach, particularly for foreign firms that currently practice only one system of law, American law, English law, and so forth. And so what we've seen in other significant markets that have recently opened, such as South Korea and Singapore, is that we've seen a very cautious and conservative approach. The global partnerships sometimes are more energetic and more aggressive, and they will be the most probable early entrants through a series of affiliations with good national firms or acquisitions of them. And they would probably operate under a structure like a Swiss Verein. I think Denton's would be one good example of that type of an approach. But what I would expect to see from the response of the foreign firms would be a cautious approach, and one that carefully identifies what their strategic space will be in the Indian market. Consequently, for Indian firms, a similar question is going to be, what are the areas as our market continues to grow in which we might be vulnerable to foreign competition?
Thanks so much. Maybe I'll share a few thoughts in terms of just out of my experience dealing with various international firms. So as I said, it is a question of profitability. How much money can you make out of an operation in India? And we look at a lot of international firms, and they come in different categories. There are some firms that make profits per partner on an average, anything between $3 and $5 million a year. You could translate that in terms of numbers of crore at 6.5 crores a million, and you can see how many crores is that. And you can look at the profitability in terms of partnerships in India. They are used to that kind of profitability. The next tier would be ones that are in the 1 million to 2 million ballpark. You then have a $500,000 to $1 million ballpark in terms of profits per partner. Lots of these guys are going to look at, if I do get a set of people in India, am I going to at least average out at that level of profitability? And so when you look at the international market, they actually are structured as different firms. So they are firms that practice only their laws. So you might have a Cravat or a Davis Polk that might practice only American law. You could have a Slaughter and May that would practice only English law. And you could have a bunch of other firms, international firms, that will actually practice multiple laws. Each one of them would approach it very differently. I think Norman mentioned a variant structure. Variant structure is actually like a franchise model. So popular variant structures are Baker McKenzie, DLA Piper. You could have whatever practice you have in India, you contribute a part of your revenue to an international pool. Out of that international pool, you get a brand, you get training, you get some software, you get some basic soft assistance, but you run your practice yourself. Now, if you look at these firms, you will see that the easiest to set up in India is Variant, because nobody is out of pocket. And those are probably the firms that you'll see entering first. The second lot you will see is those that practice multi-jurisdictional law, and so they are comfortable having their partners spread around in different parts of the world. But they will need to keep an eye on overall profitability. So if I was a partner in, say, one of those firms, I will say, why should my firm be investing in India for 5 years without return? Because if I do badly in 5 years or 3 years, you'll sack me from the firm. So why should I subsidize somebody in India? And those are questions that a lot of these partners in these firms ask. It is not going to be an easy decision for the management to say that I have deep pockets. Deep pockets is meant for me. I sit in whichever jurisdiction overseas. They are not meant for those guys in India. And so therefore, how are firms going to approach the India practice? And I think the environment has changed from a 2000 to 2008 scenario where every international firm was growing through its hat, to post-2008, to post-2012, now when everybody's under severe financial stress. There is a huge pressure on international firms competing with each other and competing with artificial intelligence to actually keep their shop going. And remember, they cannot allow their profit per partner to drop. And so therefore, how do you operate in that environment? Quite honestly, my sense is that a lot of our competition in the next 5 to 10 years is going to come from artificial intelligence. So things are going to change rapidly. The question is, do we want to be on top of that game when you look at the world, and do we want to be part of that? Or do you still want to be riding a bullock cart where everybody is flying in a helicopter? But that is how international firms would look at India. It's not a given that there will be a rush. Today's world is different. Many people have questions over whether Indian clients will pay them, because you typically do not set up in India only to bring your clients to India, that is inbound into India. What you expect is outbound from India. And when you look at clients paying anything between $500 to $2,000 an hour, how many Indian clients are happy to pay those kinds of fees? So it doesn't make so much business sense actually to set up a large enough presence in India. At least that was my sense. Guys, anything?
If I may add to your comment about pricing, I think that is a very important point. A foreign firm finds itself in a difficult situation sometimes. For example, foreign firms in most markets, because they are large, famous international firms, have a perception, or are perceived rather, they are perceived to be very expensive. And that creates something of a competitive disadvantage for them for some types of work. So if I'm a client sitting in New Delhi, I might say that I am not particularly interested in instructing a foreign firm because I don't want to pay their rates. If I'm a partner sitting in London in that firm, I am very concerned about the ability of our operation in India to get those rates. Now, what becomes the dilemma for the international firm is that some of them will attempt predatory pricing, offering fees that are not profitable in order to try to gain market share. And that is a strategy that seldom works very well. So that financial concern makes it something of a problem for the foreign firm. The other thing I would add is along the lines that you just addressed, the partners in foreign firms today are much more sophisticated than they were 15 years ago. One case study of this is the experience in the market in Russia. In the 1990s and early 2000s, there was a stampede of foreign firms into the Russian legal market, which at that time was very undeveloped. But what has happened since then is that a number of very successful, profitable, and high-quality Russian firms have now grown up to challenge their foreign competitors. And so even as a long-term proposition, moving into a big market, a market with this, particularly one with the size and sophistication of India, is not only a significant risk short-term, but it's also a significant risk in terms of the long-term results. So I think there's this caution today that we perhaps did not have even 8 or 9 years ago when the South Korean market opened up, and certainly that we did not have 15 years ago when the Russian market opened up, and that we certainly did not have previously when the Brazilian market began to allow foreign firms in under certain restrictions.
Ron, you wanted to say something?
Very much so. I just want to echo some of those sentiments that Norman's just made and what you were also saying earlier. Is that if you look at it globally, frankly, global law firms are really only there in numbers in financial centres where they're permitted to practice local law, because that gives them the ability to have substantial debt and equity capital markets practice. And that's really what it's all about at the end of the day. I think it's quite obvious that when foreign firms come to India, they're going to be restricted to practicing their own law. So I would be amazed, actually, if we see foreign law firms come to India in substantial numbers, firstly, but also in those offices that do open. I think we're going to see handfuls of lawyers. I'd be very surprised if we saw anything other than that. We could later move across to discuss the regulatory issues that are going to come along with foreign firms, even practicing foreign law firms here. But I'd just like to see whether the other panelists have any other discussions on the business angles of it.
Anubhuti, any thoughts that you have on this?
I think I would just add another thing, and again, it's just my personal opinion. I don't see the Indian lawyers are any different or any less qualified or competent. Foreign lawyers would come in and practice foreign law. If Indian lawyers can do that today, we do have dual qualified lawyers. I know law firms which do try and say that we have dual qualified lawyers and try and give preliminary foreign law advice from India and then get it cross-checked merely by foreign law firms. So I don't think there's anything to fear. As Indian law firms are not one breed, they're different tiers, so are foreign law firms. there would be a there'll be uncertainty for a while, but there would be a balance that will be created in a few years' time.
Chanda, any thoughts?
Yeah, I just had an example of, so partially, there's a law firm called Rouse. So it's an English firm. It started off being an English firm. And it came into Asia and looked into markets where the foreign big corporates were having problems with. So they, the work they were getting done, but the communication standards were below par, the reporting was below par. So they set up offices in Indonesia, Philippines, in the whole of Southeast Asia, which was an enforcement problem. So they started with an enforcement law firm for intellectual property law. So I discussed with them, I said, what about India? They said, no, but you have a very, the lawyer level in India is already so high, there is no chance in hell that we can compete with you guys there. So that was the good news. As a result of that, we undertook that same exercise. And today, as a firm ourselves, we practice law in at least 8 jurisdictions and make a lot of money out of it. Because a Sri Lanka, a Bangladesh, a Pakistan, Myanmar, there's a huge opportunity. So I would look outwards. I don't see why we always keep looking inwards. Why aren't we looking outwards? First aspect is we must